We'd like to welcome now our panel for some political analysis. Jamelle Bouie is Slate's chief political correspondent and a CBS News political analyst. Seung Min Kim covers the White House from over on Capitol Hill for the Washington Post. Ramesh Ponnuru is a senior editor at the National Review and a columnist for Bloomberg View. And Jan Crawford, of course, is our CBS News chief legal correspondent. Jan, you've been incredibly busy this week. And I know you, first with the travel ban, now with the what's next. And this list of contenders, it sounds like you see 5 main names that the president's focused in on now.
Right, and the president has said he's narrowed down this list of 25, big list that he had down to just a handful. And I think right now there are 2 leading contenders, both federal appeals court judges, one here at the prestigious D.C. Circuit, Brett Kavanaugh. He kind of has those elite credentials the president says he wants. Yale Law School, he clerked for Justice Kennedy, and he's been on the appeals court here for 12 years. He has a lot of experience. He's highly regarded both sides of the aisle, but he also kind of has that regular guy persona. You know, he coaches his 2 daughters' basketball teams. Then the other potential leading contender, federal appeals court judge Amy Coney Barrett. She would bring real diversity to the Supreme Court. She would be the first conservative female justice, and she also would be the only justice who's not from the Ivy League. She went to Notre Dame Law School, then came here, clerked for Justice Scalia, and then went back to teach at Notre Dame. Conservatives like her because she had a brutal confirmation hearing, and she really turned the tables on the Democrats. They were trying to say that her Catholic faith meant she would overturn Roe versus Wade. So she really walked through the fire and survived and actually got 3 Democrats to vote for her.
Well, it's interesting you highlight that. I know Senator Susan Collins will be a key Republican vote, has said she won't vote for any nominee who would overturn Roe v. Wade.
And she voted for Barrett for the appeals court.
She did.
She did. And so I think, you know, that's what you're going to see all the focus on now is this is going to be a fight over abortion rights. Now, I shouldn't, before we go on, there are a few others he's looking at, all federal appeals court judges, a couple he's interviewed before for the Scalia vacancy, Multha Parr, Raymond Kethledge, Thomas Hardiman, and then another woman, Joan Larson. Those are kind of, we believe, to be other contenders.
And what is the president's thinking on this? I mean, it seems like this is an actual process that's underway. He's often criticized for not, you know, going by the book.
No, they've been very methodical about it. They have this list. They've vetted a lot of these candidates already. They've got a timetable. You're going to get a nominee a week from tomorrow because that's going to be the average amount of time between a nomination and a confirmation, and they want that justice on the Supreme Court for the first Monday in October. So we're going to have a vote, sources tell me, by the end of August or right after Labor Day. So it's very methodical. He's already started interviews, and this is really a Supreme Court nomination. As you know, that's a president's most lasting legacy. These justices will be on the Supreme Court long after the president has left this town, and this may not be the president's last nomination.
Well, exactly. Ramesh, you know, even conservatives who were critical of President Trump, when it came to his last Supreme Court justice, they were praising him. This time around, what are they looking for?
They're looking for more of the same. They have been impressed not only by the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, but also by the federal appellate court nominations, where the president has put up a series of extremely well-credentialed, well-respected, solid conservatives. That's what they're looking for here, and I think that's what they're going to get. This president understands the importance of conservative judges to his coalition. He understands that it helped get him elected in the first place, and I think he's going to deliver.
Jamelle, Democrats, like you heard Senator Blumenthal on the program, were sounding the alarm bell that this is going to bring up a lot of sort of culture war issues, for lack of a better term, abortion, gay rights, affirmative action. Cynics argue this is really just about scaring people into turning out in the polls in November to vote in these congressional races. How do you view this, and how should Americans view this?
I don't think that the cynical view that this is just trying to scare up voters is quite right. I think the conversation on the left, recognizing the extent to which the court will have a solid conservative majority for some time now, has turned to what do left-wing policy thinkers, what do left-wing politicians, what does a Democratic coalition do in a world where there's a Supreme Court that's potentially hostile, not just to culture war issues, but also to issues of economic equality, issues of labor rights? How does a left organize itself in that context? And so what I think you're seeing among Democrats, some Democrats, among left-wing thinkers, among liberal thinkers, is what does our politics look like if we have to potentially deal with a court that is hostile to a single-payer healthcare program? What do our politics look like when we have a court that is hostile to union organizing, that is hostile to labor rights? And I'm not sure that there's really an answer there yet. There has been some kind of early discussion about attempts to kind of circumvent the court by, say, adding additional justices.
Right.
Which, I mean, the thing about that, right, is that like it didn't quite fail in the 1930s. It was the threat of it ended up getting the outcome they wanted.
And there's some regret, right, among progressives who had pushed for Ruth Bader Ginsburg to have stepped down during the Obama presidency, and that obviously didn't happen.
Right. But I think that the broad picture is the left is kind of, Democrats, liberals, the broad center left is sort of, we've lost this battle. We've lost the battle for the Supreme Court. And so we need to figure out how to reconfigure our politics and our approach to deal with that fact.
Seung Min, what does this confirmation process look like? Is October realistic to have this judge seated?
I think it's absolutely realistic. If you take the July 9th date that the president says he will announce his pick. If the Supreme Court convenes on the first Monday in October, Gorsuch was confirmed in just over 2 months from naming to confirmation. So that is a completely reasonable timeline, considering Mitch McConnell has already canceled the August recess. We thought maybe for a second that he would uncancel the August recess, but I think with the major Supreme Court confirmation, we will be here through August. But the process is very similar. You know, we've got the White House portion right now with vetting of the names and the interviewing of the names. Once the nominee is announced, that nominee will make the courtesy visits to senators on the Judiciary Committee, to these key persuadable swing Senate votes, members of leadership. And we're already seeing that outreach from the White House to the Senate right now. I mean, we talked earlier about how this White House hasn't been so great at a lot of the legislative coordination and some of the mishaps that they've had with Congress. But on judicial nominations, this is a thing that the White House does very well. So you've already had Senator Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who are really closely watching, because these are senators or Republican senators who support abortion rights. They've had their meeting at the White House with the president. You've had Senators Joe Donnelly, Joe Manchin, and Heidi Heitkamp, who are the 3 red state Democrats who voted in favor of Neil Gorsuch, get their own personal meeting with President Trump, and who say they're very open to confirming President Trump's nominee if the nominee is the right person. So those are the 5 senators who our attention is going to be really on for the next 2 months.
And what about immigration? Jan, you think this could actually come before the Supreme Court?
Oh, sure. I mean, the issue of immigration,
yes.
absolutely. And I mean, we already see.
You already had the travel ban.
Right. But one of the things I think that's really interesting that we've seen in the last year and a half is these lower courts take a look at some of the president's policies, is that you have federal judges, one federal judge ruling a whole nationwide program unconstitutional. So a federal judge is essentially, one federal judge can be anywhere in the country, is setting federal policy. And the justices are really concerned about that. You saw Justice Thomas last week write separately, saying that the Supreme Court eventually is going to have to take this issue up, these nationwide injunctions being handed down by one federal judge. So this could be an issue that may lead to something like that. But on immigration, the other thing I think is, think about the Supreme Court hearings. That also could be an issue in these hearings. And there is a nominee, a potential nominee, I should say, Amul Thapar, who would be an immigrant. He's the son of immigrants. He would be the first Indian American on the Supreme Court. So he's kind of an interesting person to kind of keep in mind. That would make immigration, I think, kind of central in some of those hearings if he were the pick. It'll probably be central anyway, though.
Do you expect it to be, Ramesh?
Well, I think that it could very well. You know, these hearings tend to be wide-ranging. One thing that I think is interesting, someone mentioned West Virginia, Indiana, North Dakota, senators from those states who are red state Democrats who are being watched. All of them were in tough re-election bids this year. That's one of the reasons that Senator Durbin, the Democrat from Illinois, was saying that Democratic voters need to understand we can't block the appointment of a conservative nominee, because the map this year is going to put them under pressure on abortion, on immigration, on judicial appointments generally, to vote with the conservatives.
Although Joe Manchin, I think yesterday, said that he wouldn't support a nominee that opposed Roe v. Wade, or in that basic
he
language.
signaled that he was uncomfortable
right.
with it, but he didn't draw the line.
I think it'll be interesting to see how this all interacts with the elections in November, because if there's a nominee confirmed before the election, it may not. Conservative voters may say, "Oh no, we've won this. There's no reason to be energized about it." And Democratic voters may end up getting the enthusiasm boost from the fact that not just that there's the potential of further Supreme Court battles down the line, and in order to stop that, in order to stop an additional Trump appointment or nomination, they have to come out and vote in the elections.
Thank you very much. So much more we can talk about, but we got to leave it there. We'll be back in a moment.